The next portion of our program will be 3 questions directed directly at the school board candidates. The first question is a 90-second question, and it is, in your opinion, what should be the primary goal of a Smithville school board member?
Before we... Oh, that's okay.
Mr. Campbell, 90 seconds.
Thank you. Before we get started on that, let's be clear on the role of the school board. It is not to run the school. It is to make sure that the school is run effectively. So we got to make sure that we understand that before we move forward. Now that said, I work hand in hand with bank boards of directors all of the time. I understand the purpose of a board. I understand its oversight and accountability function, and I have the ability to exercise that because of the work that I've done. I also understand where its authority begins and ends. And that is really important for us to all understand. Now, with that knowledge, I can also use my knowledge and experience in education, my knowledge and understanding of financial statements, reports, budgets, the bean counter stuff. And I can use the skills that I've talked about earlier about analyzing the underlying numbers and the processes and identify those opportunities, the weaknesses, and those things that maybe aren't apparent to those that don't have those skills. Now, back to the pecan. The board's goal should be the same as everybody else's goal. Thank you. To take all of our little pecans that we're given and that we're to take care of and not to use them as a nut and just crack them open and eat them for a satisfactory hunger right now, right? It's acceptable is not good enough. What we need to do is treat them as seeds that are to be planted, that we pour all of our resources in so that they can grow to be what they were meant to be, what they were born to be.
Time.
Huge trees that produce year in and year out for the rest of their lives. Thank you.
Mr. McKay?
Thank you. I think the role of school board member is actually probably one of the most misunderstood roles in my experience. We use the term school board member when you're actually a trustee. So when you're elected, you now become a trustee, a caretaker of the school. That includes a lot of things. Obviously includes the students, includes the teachers, includes the taxpayers, the parents, the citizens. And you have to look out for all of them. You have to be that caretaker. It's kind of like being a trustee of a pension plan or a 401k. You don't make the investment decisions. Somebody else does that, but you have to oversee that. You're the caretaker. That's the primary role of the school board, is to be that caretaker, to oversee management's running of the school district, and that's its primary function.
Thank you. Ms. Rutherford?
As a school board member, it's my responsibility to look out for the interests of all the students and of the community resources. I will continue to advocate on behalf of our students at the local level, but also on the state level. You know, Steve mentioned that there is a lawsuit because the state of Texas decided to decrease funding to public education by over $5 billion. It's important for every school board member to be active on the state level and do what we can to make the people who run the state realize just how important public education is, and that they need to show that by funding it appropriately. So, as a school board member, I will make sure that I am holding myself accountable for protecting the resources that we have here from local taxes, but also making sure that we advocate and make sure that the state of Texas makes sure that they really value public education.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yeah, so when it comes to primary goal of school board member, I think it falls back on making sure that there's appropriate level of governance over the school district, and also that you're setting policies that help the school district advance in its mission to educate our children. And so what we'd have to do is work together as board members and as a board to make sure that we're listening, taking in all the information that you got to take in. It's a tremendous amount of information, and make sure that we're setting the policies and providing that oversight that's required of us. Part of that is just making sure that you have the right management in place. And so one of the primary responsibilities of a school board is to hire and fire superintendents. That's a difficult job. But to make sure that that school is meeting the goals and expectations and that all the schools are performing the way that they should be performing, make sure that all these kids are ready for what awaits them after they get through and graduate. That's the primary goal.
Thank you. The next question for the school board candidates is, how can the school board help make Smithville an education-oriented community? Mr. Campbell, 90 seconds.
I'm going to have trouble with that word too, by the way. An education-oriented community is not built with a Band-Aid approach. It's not a special initiative. It's not a special position. It's not any of that. What an education-oriented community must first have is an engaged, optimistic, and informed community. And a record of proven success and making advances is a nice first step. That's why it's extremely imperative that immediately now, starting now, that we move beyond acceptable within our district and within our campuses and start to move to a recognized and exemplary campus and district. Our kids deserve that. A great philosopher once said, people support that which they have a hand in creating. Okay, that was my wife Stacy that said that. But the point is very well taken. I mean, it speaks to communication and open avenues within and outside the district. It also talks to openness and transparency of quantifiable and qualifiable goals that can be monitored and watched. And realizing our continued progress. Once a community understands the district's goals and they can see the efforts and successes, they not only will want to be a part of that, they will volunteer to be a part of that. It will engage the community and it will bring everybody together. So, we must first develop our little pecans that I talked about, the performance, the expectation, the communication, and honestly and openly and proactively communicate that within and outside of our district.
Time.
Once we do that, we can expect an education-oriented community. Thank you.
Mr. McKay?
The first thing I would say is we need to broaden the term community, because in Smithville School District is way beyond the boundaries of the city of Smithville. We have almost 6,000 registered voters in our school district. We have kids from Page, from Flatonia, from Red Rock, from Rockney, from many surrounding communities that come into our district, not just kids who live in the city limits of Smithville. The first thing that we need to do, I think, is to increase the awareness. Make people aware of what the role of the school is and the activities that are going on. Most people, in my experience, they live in silos, so they participate in activities that are only relative to their kids and not realize there are other activities going on that they may have an interest in. So we could broaden an awareness of that and let people know what the school district is doing and do it. I would just tell you one thing, it's a journey, it's not a destination. The communication that we have in this community and our district today will not be adequate 5 years from now, 10 years, because the population is going to change. So we constantly have to work at it to get better and better.
Ms. Rutherford?
Schools and communities do not exist in separate universes. One success is dependent upon the other. When families want to move here, what's the first thing they ask? How good are the schools? We want our kids to perform well for their own sake, but also for the sake of the community. When we attract people to our community because of our schools, they spend money here. They start businesses here. They have jobs here. Every dollar that is generated in our community circulates itself 7 times. So when our schools do well, our communities do well, and that's what we want.
Mr. Gutierrez?
So when you talk about an education-oriented community, that starts with setting expectations. It's setting the expectation that families are a part of the education process. And so I think there's far too often the perception that education starts when I drop my kids off and it ends when I pick them up at the end of the day. And that's just not possible to be successful. So we got to work really hard to make sure that folks understand and know that they're part of the education process. Yeah, there's some efforts in place, programs, support, teaching parents how to be educators. All of that's important, but making sure that our kids have a well-rounded education is everyone's responsibility. Parents, family, everyone. So making sure that there's an awareness of whether it be college or career preparedness. That's kind of a buzzword right now, or buzz phrase right now, but it's true. Making sure that they're headed towards goals that will make them successful when they get out of school and make them a part of this community. Thanks.
And the final question for the school board candidates is also a 90-second question. It is, the Smithville ISD appoints representatives to the Bastrop Appraisal Board of Directors and receives income from property taxes. Some of the commercial properties in Smithville area are taxed higher than those in Bastrop and Elgin. Per the State Comptroller, the Bastrop County Appraisal District values some of our properties are higher than their recommendation. The tax liability makes it very difficult for some of our small town businesses and homeowners to budget when the taxes increase substantially each year. What will you do to be sure our properties are not overtaxed? Mr. Campbell, 90 seconds.
Thank you. That question is probably going to be longer than my answer. And going off of what Scott said a while ago, that's a 90-second question. I'm not going to bore you with the details. I mean, the mayoral candidates, city council members did a great job of explaining that. I was actually a little surprised that this was a question that was posed to us, because from a school district standpoint, the responsibilities are not that broad. They're very important, but they're not very broad. Basically, the school is to appoint somebody. Smithville the board is supposed to appoint somebody to that board. We are well represented, as has been stated. But the key to that, and it is very important, is to make sure that who we get in that spot and who we appoint to that is very diligent, is that oversight person, will challenge a board, does know how to look through the numbers, and is someone of high integrity and moral standard, and does the right thing. Beyond that, there's not a lot you can do other than on an individual basis, as has been expressed earlier. So again, I thought it was a little different question for a school board, but it is an important point, because the people that you do put in those places do carry a lot of responsibility and do represent you and I in that respect. Thank you.
Mr. McKay?
First off, I don't want to appear flippant, but I feel your pain. I have a home, and I also run a business that has multiple properties in Bastrop County. I fight those valuations every single day. And the appraisal system, and this is my opinion, is fundamentally flawed. It's a broken system. That's not something that the school board is going to be able to fix, that we can fix on a local level. Many of us in this room, and age-wise, can remember when we didn't have this appraisal system, when each local county and school and city selected their own appraisal body, and they wrote their own rules, and then the legislature said, that's no good, we've got to be all equal, so we set up the current appraisal system. So, in my opinion, it's a fundamentally flawed system, but it's not one that the school board has a lot of authority over changing, other than to lobby our legislators.
Ms. Rutherford?
I struggled with the role that the board had in this as well. The last thing we want to do around here is raise taxes. So whoever we appoint to the board needs to be someone who is going to advocate and have a fair. We want to make sure that the appraisals are as close to equal as possible throughout our district. And I think the process should be fair, open, and transparent so that citizens and business owners can budget and plan accordingly.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yeah, this is a challenging one. I think you've heard a lot of different perspectives, but generally the consensus is that we don't get a lot of control over those seats. We have very limited ability to vote those folks in, and we've done well working with the county and making sure that we get representation over here. That's the most important thing. So using our relationships, everyone here has relationships with some of those folks, making sure that we're working with the county and getting folks that represent our area over here is probably the most important thing. Taxes are difficult. We need them to operate, but we also need them to not be burdensome for the folks that have businesses here. So the important thing is that they're not overtly high and detract people from bringing their businesses here, but at the same time we need those taxes to make sure we provide the services all of you expect. Outside of that, I think that everybody knows that there's a process that's been brought up several times. I think there could be better transparency amongst our appraisal district board. So one of the goals that I'll take, just knowing that question hit our radar, is to go back. I know several of those folks very well, and I'll take that, run with it, and go have some conversations with them about how we can create more transparency amongst that group. Appreciate it.